Right. Now it has been recorded. Activity-based costing is new thing that you have not learned in advanced level. But you should not be afraid just because of the name. And sometimes if you have read something in textbooks, when they explain activity-based costing in graphs and question, there are so many activities, so many cost pools, so many cost drivers, so much calculations. As a result, sometimes you might break your head. Oh my goodness, this is really difficult. But it's not. Actually, so those examples are given in textbooks by considering real life examples. In real life examples, as I just told you, when the indirect costs, overhead, are going to be significant amount of the cost, those costs are identified into different, or in other words, I can say that as many as possible, as many cost drivers possible, sorry, cost pools possible, with the logic that they are driven by specifically identified cost drivers. Simply speaking, if managers can argue that yes, this is a separate cost, this cost is driven by this driver, okay, that is a separate cost pool. In real life activity based costing system, the technology, especially computers, help you to do this. So then computers can create thousands and one cost pools. That is the reason. Thousands and one cost drivers, or even million, of which you select only 1,000. So simply speaking, in real life, activity-based costing system cannot be implemented with its real objective, real purpose, without being incorporated or integrated with computers or technology. That is the reality. But in textbooks, but in examination, we explain with few drivers, few cost pool, the pools without having computers. So that is the thing you have to first understand from the management point of view. Therefore, if you are a manager in an organization, if you want to use activity-based costing, better not to think of it unless you are going to implement it with computerized environment. No use. That would be totally utter failure. You can't, I mean, you can do the calculation, but meaningless. That calculation also will give you the same result as traditional method. But nevertheless, you have to be mindful that no matter whether it is traditional or activity-based costing, activity-based costing is going to be more meaningful, more relevant when the organization incurs huge amount of indirect cost. Only on that basis, activity-based costing would be a reality. ඉතින් ඔන්න ඒක තමයි ඉස්සෙල්ලාම තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ activity based costing වලදී. activity based costing කියන එක reality එකක් බවට පත් වෙන්නේ මේක computerized environment එකකදී පාවිච්චි කරනවා නම් විතරයි. මේකේ පුළුවන් ඕනෑ තරම් අපිට cost pools හදන්න පුළුවන්, cost drivers හදන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතර මේක ඇතුලේ ඉගෙන ගන්න learning ඉගෙනුම් ඵලයක් විදිහට තියෙන්නේ අපිට කරන්න තියෙන කාරණා දෙකයි. එකක් ඔක්කොම indirect costs වෙන් කර ගන්නට ඕනේ හැකිතාක් දුරට identifiable cost pools. cost pools වලට වෙන් කර ගන්නට ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම අපි හොයා ගන්නට ඕනේ cost drivers. මෙතෙන්දී arbitrary cost drivers අපි පාවිච්චි කරන්න යන්නේ ඒක විශේෂයි. මෙතෙන්දී හැමතිස්සෙම logic, cause and effect is there. Why do you use this? I use this cost driver because of this. එහෙනම් activity based costing වල ඉගෙන ගන්න තියෙන කාරණා දෙකයි, cost pools and cost drivers. That's it. Now, two stages can be identified like this. In the first stage, identifying major activities. Atana cost centers identify කරපු එක වෙනුවට මෙතන අපි identify කරනවා activities, distinct activities. Then assigning cost into activities in some cost pools. මෙතෙන්ට ඕන අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන් instead of activities you can use the word cost pools. Identifying cost pools, assigning cost into cost pools. Therefore you have cost pools with assigned costs. Then determine the most appropriate cost driver. As I just told you, for one particular cost pool there may be several drivers. As in the case of using the computer lab, මගේ කලින් උදාහරණය, right? ළමයි computer lab එක පාවිච්චි කරනවා. What would be the cost driver? Maybe the number of hours used by each student, maybe number of students, something like. So other than that, it's difficult to think of another driver for that. So likewise, when we take different activities, sometimes you may have more than one cost driver. If that's the case, determine the most appropriate driver. In some cases, you have only one driver, that is easy. So you have determined the driver in that case, only one driver. But still, you have to determine, this is the driver. In the case of computer lab, the driver is ours, but if you have taken something else on your imagination, that is not a proper determination. Once you have determined, then simple allocation, the rest is a calculation. Actually, in real life, these activity-based cost calculations are not done manually by computers. Automatically, it will tell you, okay, these are the costs to be assigned to each and every activities. A products automatically make it. Now we will take up a question. So this is okay. One more thing is important before doing the calculation. This identification of the activities can be done at any levels, but it is more convenient and practically if you follow this particular rule, that would be easy. One is identify your activities with respect to unit level. That means you have so many different types of products. Therefore, unit is the product. Then the activities may relate to materials, direct, indirect, or any other material movement. But always you identify your activities with respect to units. That is what we call unit level activity identification. Second level is called batch level. You identify activities to one particular batch. A batch of 100 units, a batch of 200 units. In order to set up the machine for 200 unit batch is different from the cost of setting up a batch of 100. එතකොට cost එක අපි identify කරගන්නේ per batch. Batch එකකට කීයද? Batch level එකේදී මොන activities ද සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ. So that is what we call batch level. Product sustaining. Product sustaining means, so you always, like we assume that organization has a large number of products. In order to sustain this, you incur particular costs. So different activities may be there, or setting up of a new production line. So that is to sustain the products, or maybe R&D, right? But there are arguments about R&D, where the R&D, should the R&D cost be included in the production cost or in the as an expense. We know that in financial accounting, R&D expenses cannot be included in the inventory. In the inventory valuation, you can't take it, but for cost calculation for any other internal or managerial decision making, yes, you can take it, no matter what it is. What we call product sustaining level. The other one is the facility sustaining level. Means, so you may have different types of expenses to maintain your facilities within the organization, your buildings, machineries, mainly maintenance and the capacity building. Something like example has been given as building depreciation. So this is only to um, identify, or the helps to identify different activities. So already I explained this part. I explained what is a cost driver. Think of the meaning of the word driver. Driver always causes for something. That is why we call driver. It drives. Factors to be considered when selecting a suitable cost driver. So provide a good explanation. So that's what it should not be arbitrary, logical. It should have a meaning. It must be easily measurable, calculatable. Should not be complex. It should be measuring, huh? And data should be relatively easy to be obtained. Capturing should be easy. So some examples of cost drivers: ordering. When you order goods, you have to do lots of documentations. Therefore, number of orders may be a driver. When you increase the number of orders, your cost would be high. In other words, when the number of order increases, or number of orders drive cost, number of orders go up, then cost also goes up. Number of orders go down, then cost also goes down. Material handling means once you bought materials, they are stored, they are moved, they are issued. So many things are there. Therefore, driver, logical driver would be a production run. Actually, you have to send materials to production floors and the assembly lines when there is a production, or the production takes place. Machine setup cost. What is machine setup? You know that especially in flexible manufacturing. Actually, this relates to flexible manufacturing, especially in the automobile industry. Say, take the example of Toyota. Now, in automated manufacturing, in the same belt, different types of machines or different types of cars are being produced. But from time to time, like if you manufacture, say, one model at this time, the setup would be different. Your components, different items or the particles used are different from another model. Therefore, entire production setup has to be changed. So, or sometimes when we take another example, in an operation theater, in a hospital, when a surgery was done, then immediately after one surgery, another surgery cannot be done. Why? You need to clean up this, and those machines may not be used in the second surgeries. The second surgery would be a different one. First one is something different to the first, the second one. So it's a fact. Even the similar type of surgeries, you need to clean the machines and all these things, and again set and make sure that all the machines are ready, equipments are ready for the second surgery. Surgeries are also different. If the surgery is different, equipments used for surgeries are different. So therefore, that is what we call machine setup situation. Necessarily you need not to have machines there, but equipments and the to facilitate that particular task, something should be there in a way that context is being kept already. So it incurs cost, time, cleaning, additional material. Likewise, that is what we call setup hours or setup time. Then the machine operating costs, the number of machine hours. So this is the most easiest way. Now you see, this is also taken in the traditional method as well. That's what I just told you. Under activity-based costing, cost driver could be anything. Logic is You must be able to argue and justify that this drives cost. That's it. Production scheduling, sometimes production runs, dispatching costs. So likewise, best thing that I suggest already, I just suggested to Kingsley sir, the coordinator, to take you to a factory to see how these kind of things are happening, to get good understanding and relate it to what you have learned. So the calculation is not difficult, it is straightforward. How? Take each and every, no matter how many activities or cost pools, 1,000 cost pools, ask the computer to take the cost or the total cost of the cost pool as the numerator divided by um, the cost driver. Then you have a cost driver rate, cost of a particular cost pool divided by the driver, units of the driver. You determine a driver rate. Once you have the driver rate, multiply it by the appropriate activity or the number of drivers in applicable for that particular product, then the cost object, then you have the cost. We will do an question. So there are two examples. Quickly we will go through. Actually, this is it the previous one or not? No, not the previous one. Okay. Okay, I will explain. Hold on for a second. All right. Activity number 3.6. In addition to the information of activity 3.3, 3.4, yes, actually previous example continues. The following additional information is also provided. The following information relates to activities carried out in materials procurement: purchasing material, receiving materials, disburse materials. And the following information relates to activities carried out the general factory: production scheduling, setup machines, quality inspection. 1.8, and other information, number of setup hours and production runs and all. So in 3.3, we had this situation, right? Now we can relate the same. First we'll do the calculation and see how it goes. Then additional information: quantity of activity, cost driver for 100 units of products, quantity of activity cost driver for 200 units of product. So the example of product A and B in two batches. Now you would understand there would be something different pertaining to 100 units and 200 units. In the previous example, we were able to calculate the unit cost of one of product A and product B without considering batch. But when we have activity-based costing, of course, costs pertaining to this one batch vary. We'll see how. Machine department, X and Y, and assembly department, and number of purchase orders, number of material receipts, number of production runs, number of setup hours, and all those things are different from here. Some are similar. Number of purchase orders same, but here number of production runs are different. Setup hours significantly different. Here 10 hours, here 50 hours. Direct labor hours different. Machine X and Y totally different. Then calculate cost of a unit of each product, or that is A and B, using activity-based costing. Compare the unit cost calculated under traditional system. So answer goes like this. Activity, machine X and Y in assembly, cost is this much before allocating the other cost. Machine hour, so this 2.9 million goes along with the machine hours, therefore you have a cost driver rate of this much. Quantity for that particular activity is 2 million. You can recall for the number of machine hours utilized by department X was 2 million. Therefore, the cost of the machine department itself before taking the additional cost, that is divided by 2 million. We did not divide the total cost of the machine department. Here we divide only cost related to running machines. Here cost related to running machine in Y divided by this. Therefore, machine hour rate, cost driver rate in department Y is different from cost driver rate of department X. Assembly, labor hours. So therefore, cost driver rate is 1.24. Now, other costs, the purchasing material, receiving materials, and disburse material. Just recall, total cost of, in the previous example, 11.7 million, as I remember. Yeah, 11.7 million was finally we allocated only to department X, Y, and assembly. But here under activity, we do not do that. We take the specific cost of the machine department divided by machine hours. The specific cost of machine Y department divided by machine hours. Specific cost of assembly department divided by the direct labor hours, and calculated cost drivers. Now we will move on to material procurement department. Even in the material procurement department, total cost of 1.7 million has been divided into three: material purchases, material receipts, and material sending, disbursing material. So then the cost varies. Material purchases, you can argue that yes, number of purchase orders, yes, that's correct. Material receipts, maybe number of material receipts. Orders are different from receipts. And material handling, or in the disbursement, maybe the production runs. When a production run takes place, you need to disburse, you need to send material. That is why here three different rates have been taken. Accordingly, you have three different cost drivers. General support, total cost was 1.8 million, just recall, under the traditional method. Now divided into three: production scheduling 1 million, setup machine 600, quality inspection. Scheduling runs or is driven by production runs. Setup machine, setup hours. Quality, maybe number of inspection. Accordingly, you have three drivers. Now you can see, compared to the traditional method, we use three departmental rates, overhead absorption rates. Instead, in the activity-based costing system, we use nine, one, two, three, yes, nine drivers. Should be more specific. If the overhead is significant, your product cost finally should be different. You see, with respect to product A, direct costs, that is 100 units at 100 rupees, therefore 10,000. Now you have to take entire batch. Here you can't calculate the cost of one unit, because certain overhead costs are applicable to a particular batch, a particular run. Then overhead allocation goes like this: machine X and Y, 500 multiplied by the rate. What is the rate? 1.45. This is the rate. 500 into 1 point. So here 1000 into 2.69. That is why 1000 into 2.69, 2609. Assembly, 1.24 into 1000. So answer. Materials, the procurement, only one purchase order. Therefore, 1 into per order 96 rupees. Rate is this. 96 into 1 is. So likewise, material receipts, only one receipt into 120. And production runs, 5 production runs have been there. So for one run, 100 rupees, 100 into 5, it's 5. General support, production scheduling, 5 scheduling, unit, the driver is 500, 500 into 5, 2500. So likewise. So finally, what I just want to show you, total unit cost comes to 205 under the activity based costing. But under the traditional method that we have already calculated, it's only 166. So you see a significant difference. It is more than 25% of the total cost. If you have taken highly competitive decisions, a pricing decision, or any other internal managerial decision, either to produce, scrap, or buy decisions, you would end up with so many losses. So that would not be really appropriate. The real cost of this particular item is 205. Similarly, the cost of the product B can be calculated by using the same mechanism, whereas your cost would be 301. Under the traditional method, it was 333. It is almost 10% less than the cost calculated under the traditional method. So now you can compare. Under the traditional method may give you distorted situations when the overhead is significant and the production process is sophisticated. So therefore, our recommendation is, when the production sophistication increases and the overhead is also significant, better think of using more appropriate overhead allocation basis. So here, as a system, we can use activity-based costing. What has happened in the previous example, so the cost of product A had been understated at the expense of cost of product B. B had been overstated unnecessarily. A had been overstated. Sorry, A had been understated. B had been overstated. Then what is likely to happen in the right now? You can see unit cost of A is understated. Unit cost, whereas unit cost of B is overstated. What is more likely to happen in the real life competitive environment? You will not be able to sell this particular product because you set the price which is about 333. You say 400. Others might sell it at 330 or 340. You might think that that is loss. You will have to exit from the market even that is a profitable product. For example, say that um, the selling price is 350. You might say that no, that profit is not adequate, I will quit. But had you sold at 350, your real cost was 300. You could have earned a profit, but you are exiting from the market. Whereas in the case of product A, you may sell at a very low price. You may set the price as 200, but your real cost is 205. Others may not be there in the market. You may sell it at 200 by incurring a loss. So now you can understand implication. They are called managerial implication. Now the last question, quickly we will take it up. You better read this question later on. I'll just summarize. In this example, there are um, different activities and costs. What are the activities? Uh, Cost pools, machine depreciation, product inspection, factory maintenance, material handling, electricity and power, product engineering charges, machine setups, department manager salary. So they are the cost pools. And some applicable drivers are also given: machine hours, inspection hours, material moves, product engineering hours, number of production runs. So they are these two things, units are called drivers, they are called cost pools. You are required to following information is also given for a batch of 100 units. But there are two products, portable and standard, for 100 units. Direct material, direct labor. So straightforward. These two things, 60,000 and 50,000 for a batch of 100 units, portable and standard, two types. Need not to do any additional calculation irrespective of the method. This is directly assigned. The machine hours required, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are the drivers. Required for portable is greater than this, inspection is less than standard, machine moves almost the same but relatively higher, and product engineering relatively high in standard, number of production runs same. Calculate the unit production cost of each product as per traditional and traditional absorption method and ABC costing method. I'll show you the answer. Under the traditional system, what do? It is straightforward. Then you take the entire overhead cost, that is 1.9 million, add everything together. This is called total indirect cost in one cost pool, one cost center. Recall what I just told you. We are not allocating them into different. So we are going to use plant-wide rate, single rate, and divide it by the machine hours, total machine hours, expected machine hours 200, therefore 970 per machine hour. Then we do the calculation. These two things do not change. One batch, second batch, direct cost, indirect cost, overheads would be 970 into 120, here 100. We'll take the hours from here. 120 hours and 100 hours. Total cost is 256,000, 247,000. This is for 100 units. Therefore, to find out one unit cost, divided by 100 in both cases, it ends up with 2,500, 2,400. Almost the cost is same, but this is there's a slight difference. But two items, standard and portable items, uh, end up with almost similar cost. Now we will move on to activity base. So cost driver rate for each and every cost pool, cost center we calculate. Cost driver for machine depreciation is this much, production inspection this much, factory maintenance is this much, material handling is this much, uh, machine hours this much. This is 1000, that is product engineering, line setup this much, and manager salary driver is this much. Now you see the range fluctuation in the cost driver. Cost driver rate is small as 50 and bigger as 6250. Under the traditional method, what we did was we took a blanket rate. We took everything, total cost 1.9 million divided by 2000 and determine it is 970. It is a value in between 6250 and 50. But under the activity based costing, we do not do that simple mechanism. We take each and every. So you can understand the magnitude, the significance of this in a situation. Machine setup, you need to allocate a cost of 6,000 rupees per one run. In the case, whereas under the traditional method, irrespective of all those things, you allocate at the rate of 970. So it looks like it's very logical now. Had we used the traditional method, of course, your costs of different products end with different values. Now see the calculation for both batches, portable and standard. Direct costs are the same, but machine depreciation, product inspection, all those things vary. Of course, why? Different rates. Yes, just setup cost. So 25,000 should go. But fortunately, in this case, both batches, machine setups, number of machine setups are similar. Had it been one setup here, entire cost would have been totally different. Finally, total cost would end up different values. In the previous example, it was, so you can compare it now. Sorry. Yeah, 2,500, but here it's a different cost. In both cases for these two, you can see. So in the case of activity based costing, it's more logical and we can consider that that is more accurate for decision making. Had we calculated this thing, we would have ended up with wrong selling decision. Simply speaking, like I need not to go through these slides. Already I have shown you or explain you the comparison. In a nutshell, you can keep it in your mind. Simple difference or the comparison between traditional and activity based costing is nothing but in the traditional based, you have either selected cost centers. Even in that case, if you want, you can say cost pools, but cost driver or the value, the cost allocation or the absorption basis are dependent on traditional volumes, mainly machine hours and labor hours. Alternatively, we can take the number of units as well. That is what we call volume based traditional drivers, or the bases are used. But in the case of activity based costing, costs are first allocated to cost pools as many as possible on the argument that cost of that particular pool is driven by separately identified logical base. That base is called cost driver. So therefore, in activity based costing, number of cost pools are large, number of cost drivers are immense. Actually, activity based costing system operates in a real life situation, computerized environment. Um, so these things have been summarized here for your understanding. Um, Again, these two different methods will give you two different costs when the number of cost pools and the drivers are different, but two different methods, that is traditional method and activity based costing, will not give you significantly different results when the total overheads in your production process is insignificant. In the past, total overheads were not that much significant. Even though they were significant, it was possible to identify uh, uh, their cost basis to some extent. But over time, when the production processes became more sophisticated and when the technology was used, and at the same time, the relevance of overhead costs increase, especially in industries like hoteliering, airline, shipbuilding, complex manufacturing, automobiles, and so many complex manufacturing. Lots of overhead costs involved. Therefore, the relevance of ABC costing has been increasing when we can think of more appropriate, even activity-based costing can be further extended by bringing more and more um, cost drivers. So you can refine and modify cost drivers. So in a nutshell, I can say that activity-based costing would try to give you more um, accurate and decision useful information. So among some of the criticism about activity-based costing system, some people argue that even under activity-based costing system, some arbitrary cost drivers may be there. It's possible because if you do not have a very clear, distinct cost drivers, you may have to go for arbitrary. That is unavoidable. That is limitation. And again, cost drivers for some cost will be difficult to measure. For example, audit fees and R&D. So something like this. But again, remember that this will not be a problem when we deal with financial accounting, because audit fees and all those things become periodic cost. But in determining if the audit fee is very high, sometimes some big corporation that is very big, then when calculating the cost of a product, of course you need to use a particular drive. So imagine drive, so that is why arbitrary situation may be there. However, again, the use of technology, another criticism is if you try to use it without having a technology, even activity-based costing would produce um, what you call values which are not realistic, might harm the decisions. So that's all. Sorry, I just took a little bit, maybe few minutes more. I hope that that's clear. Um, Please understand that uh, in the entire process, what we did was we assign costs to products, assign costs. In the assignment, assignment is done as direct and indirect. Direct assignment is not a problem irrespective of any method because it is directly traced. Even the assignment is not going to be a problem when the organization produces only one unit, single product, because everything is direct. Everything is direct. But in the real life situation, no organization produces single product. At least different models are there. So therefore, we deal with a multiple product environment. In a multiple product environment, cost assignment is a reality. Then we assign direct cost and we assign indirect cost. Indirect costs are the assignment of indirect cost is called cost allocation. Cost allocation is done in two major methods or the approaches. Traditional approach, the number one approach is called volume based approach. Under the volume based approach, we use either single rate or several rates, but the basis would be limited. Mainly we use to determine the value, cost driver value, either machine hours or labor hours. I suggested you that if you want, you can use the number of units as well. But then volumes or the bases are limited. Against the activity-based costing bases and drivers are numerous. You can have as many as cost centers, cost pools, depending on the situation. You will have so many cost drivers. Your task is to select the most appropriate cost driver for each cost pool. Once you have it, total cost of each pool is divided by that particular driver to determine the cost driver rate. Or the once you have the cost driver rate, that rate is multiplied by the applicable number of drivers to that particular product to determine the or allocate the overhead cost. So then you would see differences between activity-based costing and traditional-based costing, especially in a situation where the total overhead cost is significant. That matters really. Keep it in mind. If the total overhead cost is insignificant from the total cost, no worry. Don't worry about these things. Therefore, real life situation now, overhead cost is becoming more and more. It's increasing. Therefore, cost allocation has a relevance. So when it comes to activity-based costing, as I just told you in a nutshell, you need to use the computerized environment. So still criticism would be there if you try to use activity-based costing without having this or some arbitration. Maybe there you need to have this kind of knowledge. In a way, in our activity-based costing system, you see a little bit relatively high sophistication compared to traditional method. So that is it. Now in the next session we will be discussing about what you call job costing. We will see how this information, today's learning about cost allocation, will be useful for us to determine job costing. So if you have understood and reconcile these things and compare, contrast these two methods, that would be easy to deal with job costing next week. That would be on coming Friday. So if you have any question, you can ask now. Otherwise, we can wind up the lecture. Is there any question? I hope that no question. So